He promised me an empire, then gave it to a stranger. My father made me give up my dream to work in his company, promising he'd hand it all to me someday. But when he died, I learned everything. Every hour I'd sweated for, every year I'd lost, went not to me or my siblings, but to my sister's boyfriend. I was 18 when my dad, Roland, sat me down at our kitchen table in Brookview and said, "Forget college, you're coming to work with me. This place will be yours one day." My older brother, Mark, and I believed him. It seemed logical at the time. Why spend money on school when we were supposedly inheriting a thriving manufacturing business? Mark quit after 2 years, said the pay was garbage, and dad treated him like a disposable intern. I thought he was just being dramatic. I stayed, I worked, I trusted, I believed. But things shifted fast. My sister Lila never set foot in the building, yet somehow her allowance was triple my monthly salary. She'd post photos from Cancun while I was elbow deep in logistics spreadsheets at 9 p.m. on a Sunday. Dad said she'd still get her share when he passed, and that stung, but I ignored it. I figured, fine, she gets cash, I get the company. Then came Noah, my sister's new boyfriend. Within months, he was dad's prized protege. Suddenly, he was traveling for client meetings. He was being taken to fancy dinners. He was getting dad's insider wisdom. Meanwhile, I was doing everything that made the business actually run, managing operations, inventory, payroll, and every customer meltdown imaginable. Dad forgot my 25th birthday that year. Not a call, not a text, but he threw Noah a huge rooftop birthday bash in downtown Fairview, complete with a DJ, an open bar, and a giant golden N made of flowers. I stood in a corner like a party crasher while people toasted to Noah's bright future. I confronted Dad. He said Noah had fresh ideas. I asked about my ideas, the ones that had increased revenue 30% last quarter. He shrugged and said, "That's your job." Noah started making comments too. Little digs about how I was basically just a glorified employee and how Dad considered him the future of the company. Dad laughed every time. Actually laughed. I worked there for 8 years. 6 a.m. openings, 8 p.m. closings, emergency calls at midnight, weekends, holidays. I made less than some of the new hires because Dad insisted I didn't need much, since I'd eventually inherit everything. Meanwhile, my friends were building careers, buying homes, living like adults. I was living off scraps and promises. Then Dad got sick, cancer, 6 months. I thought maybe now he'd acknowledge what I'd done. Maybe he'd finally talk to me about transitioning into leadership. Instead, he spent those months dragging Noah to every meeting, every introduction, every handshake that mattered. 2 days before he died, I asked him directly, "Am I going to run the company?" He stared at me like I was a stranger and said, "We'll see." The will reading was last Tuesday. Mark got Dad's townhouse in Ashwood, maybe worth $300,000. Lila got his savings account, around $200,000. And the company valued at just over $1 million. 80% went to Noah. The remaining 20% was split between my siblings. I got nothing. Not a mention, not a dollar, not even a letter explaining why. Lila smirked at me from across the conference table like she'd won something. Noah couldn't look directly at me, though he kept suppressing a grin. Mark looked horrified, but stayed silent. I walked out, didn't say a word, drove home in dead silence, sat in my tiny apartment surrounded by 8 years of wasted time. The next morning, I started making calls. First, our 3 main suppliers. Told them I was leaving the company and strongly suggested they require upfront payment for future orders because management is changing. 2 canceled their contracts within 48 hours. Then I called our biggest clients, the ones I'd personally kept happy for almost a decade. I set up coffee meetings. When they asked where I was going, I told them the truth. I'm opening my own company, and I'm taking everything I built with me. 4 signed contracts the same week. Noah called me screaming about contract interference. I reminded him I never signed a non-compete because Dad always said, family doesn't need contracts. Mark called yesterday saying Noah is panicking. Revenue is already down 40%. He asked if I'd consider coming back. I laughed so hard I had to hang up.